in this lesson, we'll take a look at how we can use a cloner to start to create a background element for our broadcast piece. So in this case, we have a bunch of letters that we want to copy in different ways around the background. So let's say we want to have these sort of floating at different levels back here. So what we can do is go to MoGraph and let's create a cloner. And cloners are going to be used a lot when you're working with MoGraph. They're really powerful. There's a lot of great functionality in here. And so let's take a look at what we can do with this. So for a cloner to work, we need to have an object to actually clone. So let's start with just a single object. And so I'm going to go ahead and grab the A, drop it under the cloner, and let's go ahead and I'm going to group the rest of these just temporarily so that I can hide them really quickly. So let me go ahead and group them, and then I'll turn the visibility off. So we've got a cloner. We've parented an A underneath. So this could be a cube, it could be a cylinder, it could be anything that you want to clone. And so I've dropped it underneath the clone, and now you can see that we have a few versions of our A. So we'll go ahead and select our clone, and then we can look at the attributes. So in here, you can see that there's a mode, there's a method for going through the clones, and then there's a count and an offset here. So if I wanted to increase the number of A's that I'm seeing, I can go ahead and increase the count. Okay. The reason that each copy is moving upward is this value here. Okay, so we have these transform values, position, scale, and rotation. If I go ahead and take that Y position down, all of the copies are on top of each other. If I go ahead and dial the X translation up, you can see that they're all spreading out evenly. Okay, so we're putting a certain amount of space in between each one. Okay, and this is defined by this per step value. Now, if you want more information specifically on MoGraph, I'd encourage you to check out our MoGraph training on the website. We'll just go through this very quickly. So we can also change the mode. So right now it's linear. All the copies are being copied along a straight line, but we can change it to radial, which will enable us to create this sort of radial effect here. We can increase the amount. We can increase the radius of our circle, so you can create some interesting text effects there. Okay, we can also change the plane that we're using. So right now we're using the XY plane, so you can see it's oriented to face the Z plane, but we could change this if we go in here to align it to different directions. Okay, we can also change the angle, start and end angle, if we want to create kind of an arc. We could do that, which is something that's done a lot in broadcast. Okay, we can also offset it, spin it around, so there's a lot of different things we can do. Okay, we can go ahead and also change this from radial to a grid, or we can make a 3D grid. We can choose the number per each direction, X, Y, and Z, or H, P, and B, depending on how you look at it. And let's go ahead and pull this out. You can increase the distance between each one. Okay, you can increase the number, X, Y, and Z, and create a grid in that way. Okay, and we're still just working with one object. So if we were to come in here and do something to this object, it would change everything about all of the objects. So if you're working with something that's parametric, it's really cool because you can clone it and then go back in and change those creation attributes, and that'll be reflected on all of the clones. Okay, so let's create our background. So I'm going to drop a few more letters in here. So I'm just going to drop them in order, and let's take a look at something. So I'm going to take this back to linear. Let's decrease the X value here. Okay. And let me go ahead and turn on all of our letters here. That's why we had so much space. So I'll turn the visibility of those on, and make sure the caps are all and the roundings all turned on. All right, so right now you can see that our cloner is set to iterate, so it's going A, B, C, D, A, B, C, D, A, B, C, D. So it's going down the line from top to bottom. But we can also change the way that it proceeds through these if we have multiple objects under our cloner. We can change this to random, and now we get a random configuration of these. Okay, so what I want to do is drop all of the rest of these letters and numbers underneath our cloner. Okay, and I'm going to choose, let's turn all of them on. And I'm just holding down Control to turn all the visibilities back on. Okay, and so let me go ahead and do that. You can also do it to that null before you drop them out. Would be a good idea to do. Okay. So now we've got all of these sort of randomly placed here, but we still just have 26 of these and they're all in a line. So what I want to do is create a grid array. Okay, and I want to increase the size quite a bit. Okay, and we'll increase it in this direction. I don't want it to be very thick going in this direction. Okay, so I'm going to leave that fairly low, but I'll increase the size of this. And you can see we can grab the handles here and increase it manually. I'm going to go ahead and increase the count. Let's increase that to maybe 12, maybe 10. Okay, I'm going to increase that thickness a little bit. Okay. All right. Now I want to randomize these letters a little bit. Okay. Right now they're all the same. We can go into our cloner and go to transform and start to manipulate these, but I want to have a random effect to this. So that's where effectors come in. And if you can see, if I select my effector tab, there's no effectors associated with this. So with the cloner selected, I'm going to go to MoGraph effector, and I'm going to drop a random effector in. Okay. So now let's go back to our cloner really quickly. You can see now there's a random effector turned on, and it's got a little check by it. If I go ahead and hit that, I can turn off the effect of the random. So what is the random effector affecting? Well, let's take a look in the random effector. So in the random effector, you can see here under parameter that currently the position is checked. If I uncheck that, nothing's being affected. So we can decide whether we want to affect the position, which will randomly affect the position in X, Y, and Z. And we can increase the amount within which can affect that position. We can also affect the scale, and we can set that to uniform scale so that we can get variation in the scale of the letters, and also rotation. So we can create some randomization in the heading, okay, or the pitch, or the bank, okay. Might take that pitch down just a little bit. I'm gonna have too much variation in that. Okay, and then we can go back to our cloner and go back to object. And I'm just going to increase that value there for kind of the size of our grid. Okay, same thing down here. Okay, so I want it to be able to cover our screen, and we'll give it a little bit more thickness from front to back. I want it to have kind of that 3D effect. Okay, so I want it to be something like that. We can always go back and modify it as we go. Okay, and you can play with the randomization again, going in, maybe randomize the position a little bit more. Okay, if you want to go in and scale everything, you can go back into your cloner, and we can start to work with the scale here. Maybe set this up a little bit more to make that default scale a bit higher. But you can see now we're just getting a random configuration made up of a combination of these letters that are cloned throughout. Okay, and the number of clones is defined by this count here. So it's going 11 clones in the X, 10 clones in the Y, and 4 in the Z to get that grid. And then we're adding some randomization using that randomization or that random effector. So once we're done with that, what we can do is start to organize things a little bit more. So I can get rid of the null. I'll go ahead and get rid of the, well, actually, I'll keep that just for a second, but I'm going to select a cloner, and let's actually name it. So let's say this is our background cloner, because we're going to start to get more cloners in our scene, and I want to be able to distinguish that. And let's call this our background random. And even though this isn't connected in the hierarchy, it is connected to the cloner, and so I want to actually keep those together somehow in the hierarchy. So I'll go ahead and group those together, and we'll call this background letters. Okay, and we can still at any time go into our cloner or our random effector to affect how those letters are set up. Okay, so now that we've got those letters defined for our background, the next thing that I want to do is start to set up our camera and our timeline for our piece. So we'll go ahead and do that next.